Okay, still considering the this section, Act 1, the first file, or are we? How far did we get on it last week?
16.
Yeah.
We're ready to start at 16.
Ready to start 16. Okay.
So my marking.
Yeah.
Misunderstood.
We talked about where the king was having his problems. Okay, and so paragraph 16 talks about the Paris Commune engages upon a terrible and exacting vengeance on prisoners. And what was the Paris Commune? That's it.
That was, I think, a collection of some of the most radical revolutionists that took over power once the king had been dethroned, and the what was the other thing? Well, after they had stormed the palace and everything, and
they're kind of the interim.
It's kind of an interim government of Paris. Like it wasn't of France, it was of Paris, and it was actually, as this indicates, it was actually in place from 1789 to 1795, but it really took on power from 1792, which is about, in the time period that we're talking about. That's when it really usurped its power. On the night of August the 9th, 1792, a new revolutionary commune took possession of the Hotel de Ville. The next day, insurgents assailed the Tuileries, where the royal family resided. And between August and 10th, 1792, and the meeting of the convention, September the 20th, revolutionary furor grew. So it's like you're explaining, as a group of revolutionaries that really took over the government of Paris and exerted all power and force at that time. And the commune became increasingly dominated by these sans-culottes, or just a group of ordinary working people. The lower class, composed mostly of artisans and shopkeepers, and they were very fiercely devoted to the revolution and to direct democracy. Getting rid of the king, just wanted democracy.
They're the average day businessman.
Right, yeah. Gordon?
Well, this the Paris Commune was just part of a national network of clubs, you might say, that it became, I guess, bolstered by the rest of them. Yeah,
some of the members of the clubs belonged to the Paris Commune, but it was kind of a separate entity. It wasn't a club. It wasn't one of the clubs. It was, but those from the Jacobins and others did belong to that Paris Commune. They were participants in it. So it was that type of individual that was very much involved. And a lot of those members of the clubs are the higher class, but there was also the lower class involved in the commune, which made it a very unique thing.
I can almost imagine that those that were seeing what was going on would realize that being a part of the high class wasn't necessarily going to guarantee them any safety, because look what's happened to the king.
Right.
So they knew they had to have sort of the general support of the working class, because it was becoming people's or government.
I guess higher class maybe wasn't even the right word for it, but it was high profile people like Robespierre and that they were
leaders.
They were leaders, yeah. The upper class maybe wasn't the right word. They were more in favor of the king, keeping the monarchy. But the activists, Robespierre, and so the upper class of the lower class. Just to recap, maybe before we start on paragraph 15, just do the summary. Just the revolutionary reaches a fever pitch, fueled by vast distrust and the taste of freedom among the masses who had been for centuries held under the dominion of the state church system. France is polarized into two camps: the loyalists, who were the monarchists, in favor of keeping the king, the monarchy, and the republicans, on the other hand, with the republicans getting the upper hand. The system of monarchy, along with its partnership with the church, is effectively abolished by the ensuing clashes of these few months here. So, where we're at here now is where there's a great deal of activity in these few months of August through September kind of thing of 1792. And one of these events was concerning these prisoners. Prisoners that were shut up at the Carmelites, at the Abbey. These were prisons in Paris. At the Forest and the Concierge Fee, etc., were butchered during 3 days by a band of about 300 murderers under the orders and in the pay of the Commune. So they're under the orders and in the pay of the government of Paris, those who were in charge of the government at that time. These men, inspired by a silent fanaticism, seemed less the ministers of vengeance than the performers of a labor to be done. They massacred without fury, but without remorse, with all the confidence of fanatics and the obedience of hangmen. The Assembly wished to put a stop to this operation of the grievous and malignant ulcer upon the worshippers of the beast's image, but could not. The ministry was as impotent as the Assembly. The terrible Commune alone was all-powerful and directed everything. The soldiers who guarded the prisoners durst not resist the avengers and suffered them to do their work of death. The populace looked on as indifferent spectators or accomplices, and the rest of the citizens dared not even venture to discover their horror. So it was a butchery type of slaughter, but it was effected in the prisons where hundreds of prisoners were massacred by a band of murderers who had been employed for the task by the Paris Commune. Most of those slaughtered were priests and Catholic clergy who had been imprisoned for refusing to swear allegiance to the civil authorities rather than the Pope. And they did it in very orderly and almost without passion. You know, it was just something that had to be done, and they just went about their work and did it. Okay.
So the church had clearly aligned itself with the monarchy.
Yes.
And a monarchy without. Right. I'm sure as we go forward here, we'll see the harlot nature of the church and how that she will become married to anyone who is in power. But at this stage, they have accepted that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Gordon?
I think it probably goes without saying that the church had done a fair bit of that kind of thing themselves, but kind of in the quiet.
Yeah.
It's not massacres, but they put people to death for not being.
Yeah, and you know, this was as it says up in verse 2 here, that there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast and upon them which worshipped the image. And that was the prophecy, and that's what happened. And it was karma, I guess. But it wasn't certainly wasn't a very nice time of the Earth's history in terms of anybody that was around to have to witness all that and be a part of it. And but it was a day of reckoning. Gordon?
But if there were any believers, which there probably was a few, they would be really out of this, because this is an argument between the Republican forces and the Pope, basically, wasn't it, at this point?
Yeah, we really don't hear much, really not much known of any true believers at this extent. There's not much in history about it, as to whether they're parts of Germany, I think. But there's not much in terms of how they were affected by this.
They may have mostly fled because the church was so oppressive in France, especially before this happened. They have moved out.
The whole point of bringing this all up, like we took it back in chapter 11, about the fall of the city. But the whole point of going into all this again is just to show not so much what happened here and why, but how it affected the outside world around it. Because it was the trigger for all the other vials that happened. And most all the other vials, except pretty much all of the 5 initial vials, pretty much all happened at the same time. I mean, they were all kind of going on. This one would have been the instigator, and then as things progressed here, the vial 2, vial 3, vial 4 were also happened, be taken as we go along.
One place I don't remember exactly where I read it, but it was something about like a French declaration that went out to the international community.
Yeah.
And it just really made me think about
it. Polarized the world.
Yeah, and it really makes me think about the one of the frog spirits being proclaimed in that, the frogs coming out.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. This influence went out that emanated from within France, the things that were happening there, and it went out from there and affected the rest of the world around, and particularly the world of the beast of the sea and the beast of the earth, which was the other territories of Europe that the state church had control of.
So did France at this point become not Catholic?
Pretty close to this point, yeah. We're coming to a point where it virtually declared even unbelief in God Himself. Yeah.
When did that get turned back around? Because they're known for being quite Catholic.
A couple of years later, I think. It wasn't very long. It was just
Yeah.
I think that's what Dave was referring to.
We'll see that.
The harlot nature of the church.
Yeah. When it realized that it couldn't win this battle, and it realigned itself.
So it wasn't so much about, it was just political, it wasn't really about doctrines of what the Catholics necessarily believe.
Very political. Very political, and it was all in, you remember we read that piece about the feudal system and how that was so ingrained into the whole environment at that time, the operations not only of the country but of the church as well, and their control of lands and money and of course subsequently people as well. And that all shifted here. It didn't go away, but it shifted focus. And that's why you see the realignment. The church had to realign things if it was to continue.
Right.
Didn't after the change to the Huguenots, the Huguenots came to power, and when he became king, he turned Catholic. I don't remember which one. That's what happened.
Okay, paragraph 17 talks about the first year of the revolutionary calendar, and also speaks about the great voice, that is the threats from outside France by the Emperor Leopold and his henchmen, the threats that they issued against France only hastened what they were trying to prevent by those threats. So he says the National Convention met September 24th, 1792. Now there's a change of government here. The National Convention was a shift. National Convention was a representative assembly convened in September 1792 during the French Revolution. It was the one that abolished the monarchy. It established the First Republic, and it condemned King Louis XVI to death for treason. This was the government that did that. And if you look at the timeline. Yeah, right here. September the 2nd was the September massacres that we were just reading about, where they went into the jails and slew all the people there, the priests that had been imprisoned for not participating in the policies of the revolution. And so they had been jailed for not subscribing to that. They were maintaining their allegiance to the church. And so that's when the commune went through and massacred all of them, or a good part of them. And after that, the National Convention was established, and various things happened after that. It legalized divorce. The French army defeated the Prussians at Valmy, and the Republic was proclaimed on the 22nd. It's just, you're almost going day by day. It was very, very fast-paced things that were happening. So the National Convention met September 24, 1792. In its first sitting, it abolished royalty and proclaimed the Republic by acclamation. And on the following day, it was ordered that all public acts should be dated from the first year of the French Republic. Such were salutary effects of the transient successes of the Austrian and Prussian armies, and of the ill-judged manifestos or great voice by which they were preceded. They only exasperated a people they were intended to intimidate. They hastened the fall of that throne which they came to support, and consolidated that power which they intended to crush. Their object was to re-establish a monarchy. Their efforts gave birth to a republic. So it just had the opposite effect of what they were trying to do. It had a great knee-jerk reaction among the people of France. So the great point of this entire narrative of atrocious activities wherein human life was so cheap was the influence on world affairs of the great voice, without which the revolution would have been much more benign, and indeed may never have succeeded. The attempt to come to the aid and rescue of the monarchy was a lightning rod to the French revolutionists, and caused ordinary men to do things that at any other time would have sickened them with revulsion even at the thought of it. But the result was the abolition of the monarchy and the establishment of a democratic republic.
I get lost in this paragraph. So the National Convention, they abolished royalty, proclaimed a republic, and then at the bottom it says they hastened the fall of the throne.
Oh, no. The they there now is the great voice, the Austrians and the Prussians. So there's two parts to that paragraph. There's the National Convention met, and it abolished royalty, proclaimed a republic by acclamation. On the following day, it was ordered that all public acts be dated. They started a new calendar.
New world.
Okay, and so such were the salutary effects of the transient successes of the Austrian and Prussian armies, and of the ill-judged manifestos, our great voice, by which they, those Austrian and Prussian armies, were preceded. The Austrian and Prussian armies advanced into the borders of France and were defeated and pushed back. France all of a sudden found a new power. They found that they had military strength, and that greatly encouraged them. And this great voice was the voice of these Austrian and Prussian armies, the voice of Leopold III, the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. And so they, that is the Holy Roman Empire, only exasperated the people of France that they intended to intimidate. They intended to intimidate them. They only exasperated them.
Right.
And it was as a consequence of that the National Convention basically became formed.
It put the gas on the fire.
That's right, yeah. They ran for a pail of water and they ended up putting a can of gas on it.
I think I remember reading that the Commune was known when they were in power there that they were a temporary government waiting for this National Convention to get established. So it was kind of a known short stint that they would then turn over to the National Convention.
Yeah, although they did, the communion remained to be a force to be reckoned with for quite a few years after.
They didn't dissipate
They
immediately.
didn't dissipate, no. And they actually became the power to which even the National Convention became answerable.
It's interesting. Last week I looked up a little bit of stuff on the Tuileries, the castle, and it sort of tells the story right there, because the Paris Commune destroyed and burned the Tuileries Palace.
Yes.
And in its place, there is a memorial garden now. I think it's called the Tuileries Garden, which is built in the shape and after the design of the papal gardens in Rome.
Yeah, the cross is in them.
The cross. Yeah. I don't know who it was. Somebody here, sometime not that long ago, went through a thing where they showed all the stuff that the church has done that is an echo of the idol worship, the groves and all of that. And that was the shape of, apparently, of the ancient groves, was a circle in the middle and your idol in the middle, and spokes going out.
Pathways or whatever.
Pathways going out. So and here again, you see the monarchy was destroyed, and for a short time the Catholic Church was repelled, but the nature of the democratic republic that came out of it was back in bed with the Catholic Church.
Yeah, it became that was part of the realignment that took place afterwards, and they sort of said, well, we were in favor of all this happening all along. So.
Yeah, all of that. I was noticing there was a thing that came up on the screen the last couple of weeks, a picture of somebody, and one of the big bishops or whatever that was involved in all of this, and he was wearing that hat, the hat that looked like a fish's mouth, shaped like the Dagon god that they had, the Philistines' god Dagon, and it just goes on, and you look at the European community today, many tongues, one people. It's just an organized rebellion against God, and it's just he's just kind of giving it a little nudge here and there to keep things from getting too organized and bring about what he wants. And these people are unwittingly playing into his hands. They think that they are getting victory, but they're just getting him victory.
And a little article we read a few weeks ago also showed, like on the feudal system, but how they are involved in basically vetoing anything that any act of Parliament or any bill that would be passed that would tend to give people more liberty. They would veto anything like that would be progressive in that sense.
All that did was wound up the spring.
Yes, but it's still happening. That was the point of that. It's still happening even today. There's still in many countries, including the U.S., there's a lobby there against anything. It's a silent lobby, but it's there nonetheless. Gordon?
What we've almost got today is the public protesting against everything. Like, they don't even know what they want hardly. They just don't want what they've got, but they don't know
because government were against it.
Yeah. And it's sort of setting the stage for divine government, where it'll be just and it'll be fair. And once people understand that, some of them at least will like that.
Yeah. Well, what they're used to seeing now is just so much corruption, and if anybody's in power, if they're not obviously corrupt, they're assumed to be. Okay, so France falls victim to the reign of terror. The French papal control was lost, and it kind of marked the end of one of the time periods of the apocalypse, the 1260-year period dated from the time of Justinian. It says, from the moment of the fall of this 10th monarchy of the great city, two powerful parties entered the arena, namely the Girondists and the Mountainists. And these parties divided the convention, and by their violent and sanguinary or bloody struggles for the ascendancy, aggravated the grievous and malignant ulcer which was consuming the quivering flesh of the image body in France. They attacked each other with the utmost inveteracy. None, however, of the measures of the Girondists succeeded. The Mountainists profited ably from their want of the most ordinary prudence, and extended their views to the destruction of the Gironde as well as to that of Louis XVI, whose condemnation to the guillotine was demanded as a security for liberty. The latter was decreed by the Convention and executed in January the 21st, 1793, 2 months nearly before the termination of the 1260 years dating from Justinian's institution of the Bishop of Rome, ecclesiastical lord paramount of the great city. The consequences of this tragical event intensified the malignancy of the ulcer in regard to France, and scarcely less so to all Europe, being manifested in a fierce and devouring tyranny and an almost universal war. And that's the big point there. That last sentence is probably so important to this whole section. That was the thing that was accomplished by these activities of the French Revolution. It intensified the malignancy of the ulcer in regard to France, and scarcely less so to all Europe, which was the activity of the rest of the at least the first 5 vials. So the execution, let's say here, of the king was a significant landmark event in the divine timeline. Bishop and king, church and state. And a couple of things here to look at first. The Girondists, they were Republican. In other words, they were separatists. They were not monarchists. They were for democracy. A political group that took its name from the Gironde department, from which many of its members came. The Gironde was like a province of France. The party dominated the assembly of 1791-92 when Louis XVI was forced to form a Gironde ministry. In the convention, 1792-95, that's that form of government, the Girondists advocated moderation, vainly trying to prevent the execution of the king. In June 1793, the party was overthrown, and subsequently its members were dispersed or executed by extremists of the mountain, who they were so called from their high position in the assembly, who instituted the reign of terror. The Girondins were opposed by the more extreme Jacobins, a powerful political club which met at the Jacobin convent in Paris. Its membership was widespread and numerous. It reached the height of its power when the National Convention met in 1792, under the leadership of Robespierre, was mainly responsible for the death of King Louis XVI, destruction of the more moderate Girondins, and the reign of terror. And that club survived Robespierre's fall by only a few months. We're talking there now about the club of the Jacobins. But it was very instrumental, not only in the death of Louis, but also for the destruction of the Girondins, the more moderate monarchist club. And the Mountainists, which that paragraph pretty much explained, they were as a label applying to deputies sitting on the raised left benches in the National Convention during the French Revolution. Members of the faction known as Montagnards or Mountain Men saw themselves as the embodiment of national unity. Its followers included Jacobins elected from Paris, as well as the Cordeliers and the followers of Jacques Roux. Approximately 300 of the 750 deputies associated with themselves with the Mountain. Although party lines were not sharply drawn, the Mountain's opponents were the more moderate Girondists. So I think that's probably enough. But I need to read to that to just establish who those two were. This takes us. This takes us back to I know Brother Thomas there in several footnotes saying see chapter 11, section 3, which is the 10th of the city fell. He refers us back to that quite often, and I know there's a footnote here on there. Can't open that file, but anyway, they on that note, we just said that the Girondists were more moderate of the two radical factions, the National Assembly, which we've already established. And the execution of the king on our timeline there happened right here on January the 21st, 1793, execution of Louis XVI, which was just a few months. You remember, we go back to the previous page. There was the National Convention, the September massacres. So things were happening fast. September the 20th, 22nd, 24th, 28th of 1792, and then just very early in January of 1793, the next year. It'll be like going back from September of 2012 to now. Would be just a few months that the king survived that series of epidemics. So.
It seems really odd that amongst all these activities that were happening fairly quickly, that they were so quick to legalize divorce amongst all these other activities. It's like what? Yeah. What? I wonder what the rush was into doing that.
What's that got to do about it?
Like, we'll execute the king later, but let's get divorce legalized.
It's a statement of liberty, though, against authority.
Yeah.
It is.
I suppose.
The Catholics were so, thumbs down on that was a statement of liberty. A lot of statements for them. Sort of do what they wanted to do. Yeah.
Sort of the establishment of the worship of reason shortly after this kind of describes the mindset of the general public, and in a sense the loose morals that they wanted to enjoy were sort of the result of the oppression that the church had placed upon them. I always say the church has at least two sets of victims: the ones who believe them implicitly and follow them to their death, and the others that get completely turned off religion and good morals and
go to the other extreme.
Go to the other extreme. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Figures.
I was noticing in Obama's inauguration speech, he brought up that we stand for liberty and equality.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't say fraternity. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I don't know why you would leave that out, or whether you were just thinking that was assumed, that was part of it.
They must have been so worried that the king was somehow going to manipulate things around to get back in power.
Well, yeah, and it was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to the onslaught from the outside of France of the power of the emperor. I said, we're going to do this once and for all.
They probably were afraid he would escape and go and raise an army or something.
Right.
It was also would also serve as a statement to others outside. This is the end.
That's what I was. Yeah, that was kind of what I was trying to say there. It was a statement of power.
It's very obvious, and that's what they wanted it to be, because they said that the way that they would date any event going forward would be based on the change of the institution of the National Convention.
Right.
That's year zero.
Yeah.
In a new world, forget the past, it's gone.
That's very true.
So probably up to that point, they'd been living under the Julian calendar, which was imposed by the Pope and the Church.
Yeah, it could be. I haven't looked into that, but that's very possible. Yeah.
Interesting times.
Yes, it was. And as we get into the, more into the second vial, we'll see, it will just become even more clear how all this played into the rest of those events.
Maybe it was the Gregorian calendar that would be imposed by Pope Gregory.
It'd be worth looking up and seeing what they had before that. I haven't done that, so I couldn't say.
Why the push on the new calendar?
Yeah. It was definitely an expression of freedom and liberty, from what had gone before, and from now on it's a new start. I think we'll probably have to leave it there with just a few more minutes. You can take a few more comments. Anybody has any? I think we've got enough to go to another paragraph.
Yeah.
Gregorian is from the Pope. That's not Pope Gregory?
Well, I think so. But where was Gregory?
500?
Yeah, where was his seat? Was he in Rome or Constantinople?
Just like the Eastern Church, that's why the Catholics, or the Ukrainians celebrate Christmas in January. That's February.
I always thought he was West, but I don't know, I could be wrong.
Wasn't the Julian calendar more Greek? When, when the Greek church took over. Is that the one?
We use the Gregorian calendar.
We use the Gregorian calendar?
Also called
the calendar introduced by Pope Gregory, the 13th, that is still in use, and is a modification of the previous Roman calendar.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is?
It would be the calendar, I guess, that's in use, we use now.
The previous was Julian?
Yeah. So that the previous one was instituted by Julius Caesar, which would have been a political, just a logistics thing on a political basis.
Yeah.
The Gregorian calendar was instituted by the Catholic Church.
Introduced by Julius Caesar in 45 BC, so even before Christ. It was a Roman calendar.
Canonized already.
It was a reform of the Julian calendar. Fixed particular dates such as New Year's Day, Easter, and so on, which would have been very much Catholic influence on it.
Well, which means that like the Greek Catholics, they celebrate Christmas Day, 6th of January.
Yeah.
Is that the Julian?
This is Julian.
Yeah.